All right, good evening, everyone, and congratulations on your acceptance to Clark University, either you or your student, depending on if a parent is the one here. My name is Terry Malone. I am the director of the admissions office, and I am joined today by Jennifer Lawton, who will introduce herself in a second. We're going to do a couple of quick slides to talk about the information that you should have received regarding financial assistance. But we're going to spend most of this time answering your questions. We find from past experience that that is the most valuable use of these webinars. While I asked you to use the chat to tell us where you're from, in terms of questions, we're going to use the Q&A. So as we go through the presentation, feel free to drop your questions in there, and we will get to those at the end. Jennifer, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. As Terry said, my name's Jennifer Lawton. I am the Director of Financial Assistance at Clark University, and I'm been at Clark for almost 3 years now. So I think, as Terry said, we'll have a few comments, and then we'll open the floor to questions. If you have questions that are of a really personal nature, we'll make sure that we give you our contact information at the end, so that you can talk with one of us tomorrow in a more confidential manner.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. So just to get started, we are going to talk about how to read and understand your financial aid award letter, how to determine your costs for your first academic year at Clark, and then jumping ahead a little bit, because I know some of you will end up depositing and enrolling at Clark, talking a little bit about what the payment options are to pay your bill at Clark and the timeline of paying your bill. So I'm going to turn it over for the next few slides to Jennifer to walk through those.
Okay, so I'm going to go with the assumption. So you guys are the beneficiary of us moving to a new sort of online award letter. We started that award letter with any people that we were communicating with their admit status as of the beginning of January. So there may be some of you that did not get that online award letter. You got either a paper letter from financial aid, or perhaps you got something from admissions outlining any merit scholarships you got from them. If you were admitted, if you found out about your admission after the beginning of January, then you would have gotten both this online award letter and a paper award letter from us that would have been tucked in with your admissions decision. So kind of two different ways that people are notified this year. So for the most part, at the top part of the letter, whether it's a paper letter or the online letter, the first section talks about scholarships and grants. This is also known as gift aid. And just like it sounds, gift aid is not money that has to be repaid in any way to anybody. It's money that either Clark or the state or the federal government is awarding you to help you with your educational expenses for the coming year. And that's basically broken down into three kinds of pots of money. One is the merit scholarships, and those are the awards that my colleagues in admissions have awarded based on the strength of the admissions application. And then there is the university grant, which if you have applied for need-based scholarship, you did your FAFSA and your profile perhaps, or maybe just the FAFSA. If you had financial need over and above what you were offered for merit, then we would have offered you a university need-based grant called the Clark University Grant. And that comes from Clark University as well, as does the merit scholarship funding you were awarded. The third type of gift aid is from state or federal grants. So this is again for students who are eligible for federal financial aid. Doesn't apply. I think we might have a couple of international students here, so this piece wouldn't apply to you. But for our domestic students, they might also get some financial aid from the state that they live in, because they filled out the FAFSA and the state has a state grant program. But many more students may qualify for what's called the federal Pell Grant. And again, that comes from filling out the FAFSA. If your family has a federal family contribution of under about $5,500, you might be offered a Pell Grant or an SEOG grant, that's Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. And those are all pretty much collected at the top part of the online award letter that you can see. And they are there's the first area where it lists all the grants, and then right below it there's a gray area that is your balance that's going to be due after you subtract out all of the gift aid. If you move down a little bit further on that award letter, you might see some self-help listed if you are a domestic student, and these would be based on the receipt of your FAFSA. So you might see some federal Stafford loans listed. The maximum amount of loan would be $5,500. It might be broken down into, part of it might be subsidized, up to $3,500 might be subsidized, and up to, so you can have $5,500 total. Maximum of 5,500, sorry, 3,500 of is subsidized, the rest would be unsubsidized. The difference between those two terms is that the subsidized loan, the federal government pays the interest that's accruing while the student's enrolled at least half time, even through grad school. Unsubsidized loans means that those loans do accrue some interest while the student's attending school. And the second part of self-help that might be listed on some award letters is called federal work study. And typically, again, that's in response to the family having filled out the FAFSA. And the amount of federal work study that's listed on most award letters is about $3,000. It's listed actually a little bit lower on the letter if you're looking at the online award letter. Again, if you're looking at the online award letter, you have our tuition, room and board, all the billed fees at the top. You have your gift aid, and then right below it, you have a little gray box that says this is what your balance due is going to be after the gift aid. And then it will list your Stafford loan eligibility. And then there'll be another gray box that does the math again and says, okay, after your gift aid and after your Stafford loan, you're going to owe this much. Federal work study is not listed in that calculation because federal work study is a fund that students actually find a job on campus. They work and earn a paycheck that they receive every 2 weeks direct deposited to their own bank account. The university doesn't keep that money to pay towards the bill. In fact, we can't keep that money to be paid towards the bill. Those funds are primarily meant to help the student purchase various and sundry things that we know that college students need to purchase in order to live from day to day. Notebooks or printer ink or toiletries or maybe a pizza out on Friday with friends, that kind of thing. That's their money to use for those kinds of costs. Next slide. So I kind of premiered this one a little bit early, but basically if you're following along on the online award letter, the total cost of attendance is at the very top. We subtract out the merit scholarship and grants, and you get that sort of subtotal balance due in the gray area. And then the next major listing is your loan. And again, another balance due after your loan if you decide to borrow it, and that equals your cost. So we give you a pretty close estimate of what your costs will be. I do have to say that the current cost of attendance that is listed on the award letters is estimated until the board meets later this month to make them final. But if we have to change the cost of attendance, we will make slight adjustments to your award as a result, so that if it's a little bit more, a little bit less, you have that information available to you as soon as possible. Sort of the next question is after all of the merit scholarship, gift grants and loans are applied, how do families manage the rest? And for most families is a combination of a couple different things. The university bills on a 2-semester system basis. So some families choose to pay whatever they owe by writing a check each semester or making an online payment each semester. And that if that's something you can do, that's great. And then you are done with that semester's expenses for your child. But a lot of families have to kind of break it down into a little bit more manageable bites each semester. So they might do a combination of a few things. They might pay a little bit from their savings each semester, and then they might arrange for a monthly payment plan. So basically this is a plan, I believe it costs about $45 to set it up per year. If at the end of the day, you're gonna owe $6,000 for the year's tuition and room and board, you could break it down into 10 payments of $600 rather than paying it half in the fall, half in the spring. There's no interest accruing on that other than the $45 sign-up fee. Parents actually also can take loans. There is a companion loan to the student, the federal Stafford student loan that the student can have. That's called the Federal Plus loan. They're both federal programs. The Plus loan does carry a little bit higher interest rate than what you might be able to get on a home equity line or even in a private loan, which is listed next. But there is a lot of flexibility on repayment in a Plus loan. For instance, since we've been in the pandemic, nobody in the country who has a Plus loan or a federal direct Stafford student loan has had to make a payment on those loans if they didn't want to, and interest has not been accruing for over 2 years. That's what I mean by flexibility with this loan. So it's definitely an option to speak with one of our counselors about if you want to extend if you want to finance the cost of the education over a longer period of time. Plus loans can be paid back over 10 years. So that is a handy thing if you know that your income is going to increase in the future, and you just need a little help now to get the education paid for. Some families decide to do a combination of all three of those things. They might pay a little bit each semester from their savings. They might set up a monthly payment plan for some of the rest of it, and then take a Plus loan for the rest of it. So you can kind of mix and match what works for you. Parents where in families where the parents, the primary parents are no longer together, both the custodial and non-custodial parent can borrow a Plus loan on behalf of their student. The next thing is the private loan, and you may have been already getting a lot of emails or circulars in your mail from places like your local banks or credit unions or national student loan lenders. And private loans for families who have a lot of what I call financial flexibility are a good option. They don't have as much flexibility on repayment as a federal Plus loan does, because they are loans through banks, and so banks generally expect to be paid each month, even if there is a pandemic going on. But they have had some flexibility during the pandemic, so I don't want to totally diss them in comparison to the Plus loan. And they do carry a lower interest rate. So these private loans are primarily loans that your student is borrowing, but because most students don't have a credit rating yet, they usually have to have a credit-worthy co-signer. And so the private loans have all different kinds of what we call borrower benefits. So one private loan might have a really low interest rate if you have a credit-worthy co-signer, and they might be able to let the credit-worthy co-signer off the loan after 3 or 4 years of repayment, if repayments are on time. So that might really appeal to one family. Another family might want to borrow the private loan and maybe only pay interest while the student's in school. So they're going to go for that type of loan. So there's lots of different things you can consider. And again, the folks in my office can help you kind of parse through some of the things that you might be thinking of. We do sort of always talk about the Plus loan first, because again, it has the most flexibility upon repayment, and it is a loan the parents borrow. The private loans are loans the student borrows, so they do graduate with a good bit of debt, and it can sometimes be a little difficult for them in that first job to arrange for things like car loans and that kind of thing, unless they've done a really good job of making sure they're making payments on those private loans. And as I said, we pretty much, most families do a combination of these things. I know when my kids were in school, they were both in school at the same time. So for one child, I would do a federal Plus loan 1 year, and the other child, I would do a 10-month payment plan, and then I would swap, and I would borrow for the other child the next year, because that way I figured when I was making those payments every month for years going forward, I wouldn't be sort of thinking about only one child having had me incur that debt. So they kind of shared that joy equally. But they really are, the way that the payments break down for both the parent Plus loan and the private loans, it does make it much more affordable for families to take on financing the education over and above what we're offering. So the timeline, there is a $250 non-refundable enrollment deposit due by May 1st, which can be done through their online portfolio. As I said before, we do bill twice a year. So for the fall semester coming up for this coming fall semester, you'll receive a bill mid-June. Now, when I say receive a bill, you're not going to actually get a paper bill. It'll be an online bill. So you'll be getting information from our student accounts office, which we work with very closely. You'll be getting information from them about how your student can access their bill online and how they can give permission for their parents to access that bill online. Because of FERPA, we do work with the student directly, and then the student does have to give permission for the parent to be able to see the bill. So you want to make sure you get that set up in plenty of time. The bill is then due mid-July. Please, 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 keep to that mid-July deadline. We do have some families every year that kind of maybe out of not really sure what they want to do or how they need to approach it, or maybe they're not aware of the various ways that we can help them finance their part, wait until the last minute, and it creates a lot of stress for the students and for the parents. And we get really busy in our offices, and we can't, as much as we'd like to, we can't like immediately reply when somebody asks. So please try to have everything sort of worked out so that we know that you have a monthly payment plan in place, or we know you have a Parent Plus loan in place or a private loan in place by mid-July. We will start allowing parents to put in Plus loan and private loan applications, usually about the time that the bills go out. So certainly if that's something you're interested in, again, you can talk with our office about that with any questions sort of end of May, beginning of June, so that you have all your questions answered in time to get those applications done. Orientation is late August. It's generally a couple of days, starts a couple of days before classes, which this year is starting a little bit later than usual. We're starting on August 29th. And then just so you know, the second semester is typically billed mid-November and is due mid-December in prep for the semester starting in January. So again, we bill twice a year. We disperse the financial aid you were awarded twice a year. Half of it goes on in the fall, half goes on in the spring, and then we're there to help you with any kind of financing help you may need.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer.
Yep.
We do already have a bunch of questions here, and feel free to keep adding them as we answer these ones. So Jennifer, the first question is said, when will a student know if they've been granted financial aid based on the FAFSA, and how does it apply to any existing aid like a merit scholarship?
Okay, so first you have to have at least your FAFSA in if you're a domestic student. And if your family makes over $100,000, you have to have the profile as well. And sometimes when we get those forms, there are either things that we don't understand, or maybe the federal government is asking us to ask you for a few more forms. So you want to make sure you keep checking back to your checklist to make sure you've provided everything there. We are releasing awards every Friday. So typically I'd like to say, and we are very busy reading files, awarding files, and getting those awards out every Friday. So typically I'd like to say if we get your FAFSA on a Monday, we only bring in FAFSAs on Mondays, you would likely not get your award that Friday, but the following Friday. So once everything's complete, I hope that would be about 2 weeks before you get your award. But again, you're always welcome to give us a call, and we can double check your particular situation to make sure that everything's in line. There was a second part to that.
No, I think that was okay. I'll ask the second part in a second. I'll add to that we have released financial aid for most of our admitted students already, because we typically don't release the admit letter until we know the financial aid application is complete. Every so often, that doesn't happen because of a late addition to the checklist. But if you have already received your admit letter and it's been a while, definitely check your checklist to see when you were complete, and reach out to us if you think that it was more than 2 weeks ago and you should have your financial aid letter. In general, we try to release admissions decisions on a Wednesday, and that same group, most of them will get their financial aid letter on the Friday right after it. So definitely reach out if you think it's been a while and you haven't gotten your financial aid letter. Jennifer, the second part of that question was, how does receiving need-based grant impact the merit scholarship?
Okay, I just want to actually add a little something to that last one. If you were admitted before the holidays, um, do check in with us. We sent out a paper award letter, so it could be that you might have missed it. We didn't do electronic notifications for that group because we weren't quite ready to yet. That's a brand new thing, like I said. So if you were admitted before the holidays, reach out and check in with us, and we can give you some more information. So what happens with the merit piece is we in financial aid do the calculations based on the information on the FAFSA and if required, the profile of the family contribution. So we take cost of education minus family contribution is your need. The first pot of money we put in there is your merit scholarship that's awarded from admissions. So if you still have need after we subtract your merit scholarship from that, then we put in need-based grant aid from the university, your Pell Grant, your state grant, your loan, possibly work study. So the very first piece of your award will be the merit scholarship, and then we add additional funds to that up to the point where we've met the amount of need that's intended.
Jennifer, is there a difference in the cost of attendance if a student double majors? And if yes, how does that impact their financial aid package?
So there is no difference in the cost of education. I mean, you can't take more than a certain number of units, which is a really high number that I don't think anybody could actually take. But there is you can certainly if you can finish your double major in 8 semesters, because your merit scholarship is promised to you for 8 semesters. If you can finish within 8 semesters, there's no additional cost to you. Of course, if you need a 9th semester to finish for whatever reason, perhaps you became ill one semester, had to take a leave, or something like that, something unforeseen like that. We do on appeal grant an additional 9th semester, but there typically has to be a compelling reason for us to grant an additional 9th semester of aid to complete your bachelor's degree. But in general, you could do a double major and it wouldn't cost you more. You might have some fees depending on what your other major is that are related to that, but not necessarily related to, they're just related to that major as opposed to being a double major.
And a lot of our students double major and are able to do that within the 8 semesters. We don't have a lot of students, unless, like Jennifer was saying, there was some extenuating circumstances that they took a semester off. We don't have a lot of students needing a 9th semester, even if they're double majoring. It's pretty common at Clark to finish in 8 semesters with either double major or major minor.
And I agree with that. I just mention it because I think I get that question quite often from parents. What if my student had to take a semester off? Certainly if they had to take a semester off during their time here and didn't start the semester, then they still have that semester's worth of aid to come back to when they come back from leave. If they did start a semester and found they needed to take some time off, typically, we can accommodate that as well, because that does happen on occasion, but not very often. We probably only have maybe 2 or 3 a year that do that. So.
Excellent. So this next question is a 2-part question, somebody planning ahead a little bit. How much will tuition, room and board increase over subsequent years? And then do the merit scholarships increase by the same percentage?
So the tuition, room and board does increase typically each year. You'll have to, the best I can do is maybe kind of give you a range. It typically will increase between 2 and about 4%. And it's, if you wanted to play it safe, maybe an average of 3 if you were going to do the math yourself and try to figure it out. And that would apply to the tuition as well as the room and board components. They will typically increase each year. The merit scholarships themselves do not increase. You're awarded that same amount for the 8 semesters that you're here, the 4 years or 8 semesters that you're here. What does change is, as I described before, tuition, room and board are the major components of the cost of education we use in financial aid. So as that increases, if your need stays, if your family contribution stays about the same, and you're going to give us your FAFSA each year so that we can redetermine that each year. But if your family contribution remains the same, then that means that your need is going to increase each year. Now, we can't cover that need dollar for dollar. So if the tuition, room and board goes up $1,000 and your family contribution remains the same. We can't cover the full $1,000 difference with grant aid, but we do generally plan to cover a portion of that each year. So we don't increase it, each year and then expect families who have the same income and same assets to come up with all of that additional increase on their own. We do award some additional need-based grant to people who qualify for need-based grant.
All right, Jennifer, I have another two-part question. How is additional merit scholarships, like from a local scholarship organization, considered, and will it reduce the Clark merit or need-based aid?
So we have a very generous outside scholarship policy. Typically that's referred to as an outside scholarship. Basically, if you are awarded an outside scholarship, if you have what we call unmet need in your award, in your package, first that outside scholarship goes to fill that unmet need. So that what that means in practical terms is it goes to pay the bill without reducing anything else. Typically, for most students, you have to earn about $5,000 to $6,000, maybe $7,000 worth of outside scholarships before I have to worry about reducing things like your university grant. We would never reduce your merit scholarship. So anybody who has just a merit scholarship, your outside scholarship is always going to go and help pay the bill. But for those of you who have a need-based Clark University grant, you would have to have about $7,000 of outside scholarships before I would have to reduce your university grant. And that's because we can use those outside scholarships to reduce your work study, or maybe you have the $5,500 Stafford loan, $3,500 of it is subsidized. Maybe we have to reduce that subsidized portion, but you can still borrow it as unsubsidized. So the total amount you're borrowing is still the same. While you don't get the subsidy, you still get the use of your outside scholarship to pay the bill. I know it's a little convoluted how I have to explain that, but it is a good idea. It's worth the time for students to go ahead and make those applications for outside scholarships, because at the best, it will help you pay your bill down, perhaps allow you to reduce the amount of loans that you're going to borrow and owe when you graduate. So it really is worth the time taken to do it.
There are a couple related questions about interest rates and credit scores, so I'm going to kind of bundle them together. Earlier, you mentioned that the PLUS loan does have a higher interest rate than some of the private loans. Do you have a sense of the range of current interest rates, and are they dependent on student or parents' credit score? Will that dictate what kind of interest rate they get?
So the interest rate is the same no matter what your credit score is. The PLUS loan is, and the private loans are based. There is a credit check, but for the PLUS loan, at least, it's a simple credit check. We're just the federal government is just looking for a FICO score. They're not looking at debt to income, anything like that. The interest rate is reset each year on July 1st by the federal government. Those rates actually are online if you just Google what's the PLUS loan interest rate. But right now, I believe it's around, I want to say 6.5%. I'm sorry, I should have written it down before this meeting. 6.5%. The private loan interest rates, because interest rates in general in the country are much lower right now, you can get a better private loan interest rate, but you really do have to carefully weigh the flexibility of the PLUS loan and repayment benefits on the PLUS loan against the lower interest rate of the private loan. And we could talk more about that if it's something individual families are interested in hearing more about. But you can certainly call and make an appointment when we can talk to you about that a little bit more. But it is, depending on what your family situation is and where the parents are in life, one loan might make a lot more sense over another loan.
All right, and then kind of related to that, since we've been talking about loans, what is the average student debt of Clark graduates?
So the average federal student loan debt is around $25,000. And that is just the federal Stafford loan that the student borrows, not PLUS loans. If you add in just the private loan, not the plus loan, but just the private loan, because the student's borrowing that, it edges up to about 27 and a half. We calculate those every year, but that's what it's been this past year. So we are low, a good bit lower than the national average, which usually is around 29,000 just for the federal loans.
All right. There's a couple of related questions, so I'm just going to sum it up in one question. Is a student able to appeal for additional financial aid?
Yes, you definitely are able to appeal for additional financial aid. You can call and talk to our office, and we will send that out to you. I do believe that Terry's counselors are also authorized to send that out to you as well. It's a very simple link. We ask you a few questions. We ask you to describe the situation. We ask you to let us know, we do ask you to put in an amount. I think it's really a good idea to think carefully about what you would need in order to help fund the education and allow your child to come to Clark. We can't always offer what people are requesting, but we will give it a really good review and offer what we can. And when you're describing your situation, if you could be as specific as you can, with everything going on right now in the country, if your 2020 taxes look very different than your 2021 taxes will look, if you could be somewhat specific about income losses, that kind of thing, mention some numbers, that really helps us get a idea of the order, how much a change of income there might be. Other people might appeal because they found that they have another child going to school now that they didn't know about already, or perhaps they're helping an elderly parent financially that they didn't know about earlier. So those kinds of things, things that we can't generally look at on appeal. We can't generally look at, if you suddenly found you needed a new roof for your home, because those are things that can kind of be planned. We all know that roofs last 20 years or whatever. We can't look at a higher than normal car payment. We can't really look at consumer debt, but we can look at sort of those things that happen in life that are beyond our control. Medical expenses, changes in income due to unemployment, or maybe reduced hours, and those sorts of things. And again, if you have any questions about whether your situation would be one that we could look at, just give us a call and we'll be happy, or email us and we'll be happy to talk with you about that.
Thank you. What is the minimum GPA to keep the merit aid in subsequent years?
So yes, we have set that now at 2.0, and that's because, and that sort of is in accordance with our overall what we call satisfactory academic progress policy, and that's a financial aid academic progress. There's a separate one for the folks over in the academic side of the house. But the federal government does ask us to review a student's GPA and progress towards completion of their degree on a yearly basis. And so we've set that by federal standards to 2.0 for the GPA. So that's what is required. And the reason is that my colleagues in admission have reviewed your work in high school. And so it's an award based on the work you've done in high school to get into college, not what you're doing while you're in college. And if for some reason, perhaps you have a rocky semester and we do talk to you about your satisfactory academic progress, you can always appeal and receive financial aid, even if your GPA is a little bit below 2.0. And as long as you can demonstrate increased progress. So say if you started out with a 1.8, and then we reviewed it again and it was 1.9, we would give you additional financial aid to continue until you got up to that 2.0. So it's not like a situation where you have one rocky semester and we just pull all your aid away. We work with you on that within the confines of federal regulations. But typically we're able to work with everybody from 1 year to the next on that if there's any issues.
Excellent. Jennifer, are federal direct unsubsidized loans guaranteed for all 4 years?
Well, you do have to do a FAFSA each year. If you are, I'm just trying to think of reasons why they might not be. As long as you do your FAFSA, and as long as you meet, you might have noticed on the FAFSA they ask you questions about citizenship, and you're providing your social security number. All those things go through a database check. So as long as you make it through the database check, you don't go into default on any prior student loans you might have had, then yes, you would get the federal direct student loans each year. And for the first year, the limit's $5,500. The second year, it's $6,500, and the third year and fourth year, it's $7,500 each year. And each student might have a different mix of subsidized versus unsubsidized. So typically, a student with a good amount of need would have a $3,500 subsidized loan the first year and $2,000 unsubsidized. $4,500 subsidized the second year, $2,000 unsubsidized, and then $5,500 subsidized the third year, and $2,000 unsubsidized. Same with the fourth.
Okay. Next question is, when a student knows that they're coming to Clark, is there anything they need to do to accept their financial aid package?
So basically, your deposit is what we consider your acceptance of the award. You will have to take a few more steps. If you do have your federal Stafford loans in your award and you plan to accept them, we will give you some instructions in late May, about how you have to, the steps you have to take to actually transact those loans. So the federal government asks each student borrower to do what's called entrance interview, and that's a online sort of quiz question and answer format designed to educate students around the fact that this is money you're borrowing, it has to be repaid, what interest is, what that does to how that adds to the cost of borrowing, things like that. So it's online. Once it's done, we get notified that it's done, and you're good to go. The other piece is the promissory note. And again, anybody who's borrowed a car or bought a house or anything like that, there's always a promissory note to sign, promising to repay the money. So we need to get those two things. They're both online. They're both done on a federal government secure website. And then we get the information. And once we have that, you're good to go. Some students may have some additional documentation that we've requested that might pop up before we can disperse any of your Clark University grant or your federal Pell grants, that kind of thing. But typically we'll be contacting you often over the summer to try to get that information collected from you, so that your award will disperse to your account as planned in time for the July bill due date.
Excellent. Jennifer, if everything remains stable in a family situation, is there financially likely to remain constant for 4 years? So
yes, if things remain stable, then the biggest changes you'll see is, like I already noted, the loan does go up $1,000 each year. We don't pull back $1,000 of grant aid when the loan goes up $1,000. It's just some additional funding that's available to you to help pay the bill. I also said that as tuition, room, and board goes up, if your situation remains the same, we do try to give you some percentage of that change from the tuition, room, and board charged in 1 year to the next year in grant aid, so that we can help you cover that additional expense. So yes, with those sort of caveats, which I think will only help pay the bill as opposed to pull anything back, we do try to keep it the same.
Excellent. If a student is not able to find their financial aid package, what should they do?
Just send us an email or give us a call. We'll take a look and see when yours was sent. We can always reprint another one for you and send it to you if that's your preferred way, or we can try to release it electronically for you again. Right. And what'll happen then is you'll get an email saying, hey, go look here, and you'll see your award.
I have a couple of questions all related to work study, so I'm going to try to lump those together. First of all, what does a student need to do to initiate work study? I think that means getting a job. Yep. And then a related question, someone has heard that at many schools, all first-year students with work study are assigned to the cafeteria. Is that the case at Clark, or are all positions open to eligible students?
Right. So we do have something called Handshake, which is an online job search. You can search for jobs there. All of our employers on campus will put their notices up, letting you know what they're looking for. Are they looking for a research assistant? Are they looking for a hall monitor? Are they looking for somebody to work in athletics? Are they working for somebody to do office work in their department for them? They'll give you a description. You're free to go ahead and apply for those jobs. Typically, you'll start seeing them early August. So you have to apply for those jobs. I would go ahead and apply for many because honestly, at the beginning of the semester, it's a bit of a skirmish just because there's so many people looking for jobs. Don't apply for one or two and then hope to hear back because it may be a while before those departments make their decisions. Just keep applying. The second part of the question was, one thing I wanted to say about that though is that as happens anywhere that you work, you do need to bring certain ID with you, and we'll remind you of this over the summer. But basically, you'll need to bring either a passport if you have one, or a driver's license and original Social Security card. If you take a look at a form called the I-9, there's a whole list of IDs that will go for that. And again, we'll remind you of this later on. But you'll need to be prepared to fill out an M4 for Massachusetts taxes and then a W4 for state taxes. You want to have information about any bank account that you plan to have your earnings deposited to, so that we can set up the direct deposit piece and so on. So do make sure that you pay attention to the emails that will come your way about bringing certain documents with you to school, because we do need to see the original ID pieces before you can start working. And there was a second part to that. Sorry, Terry.
I think you answered it. It was about whether all first-year students had to work in the cafeteria, but I think you can apply widely across campus. I do have one more work study question or working on campus question that came in. If students were not awarded work study in their financial aid package, they didn't apply for need-based aid, they're an international student, aren't eligible for work study, are there still opportunities to work on campus?
Yes. The non-federal work study student payroll is much larger than the federal work study student payroll. So just because you didn't get it on your award doesn't mean you can't work. So you're going to look at that same Handshake website that I mentioned. Some jobs may say a preference for federal work study. Some jobs, if they don't say, go ahead and apply for them. Again, the payroll for non-work study students is much bigger than the federal work study payroll. So while you might not have something on day one, it's very reasonable to expect that you would have a job at some point during the first month to 5 weeks. Again, because it takes a little while to get everybody hired. When you're responding to a job ad, the employers on campus have to have everybody in for interviews, that kind of thing. So it just takes a little while. But it is very reasonable to assume that you can get one, if not two jobs on campus that first semester, if that's what you want to do. I always do advise first year students. So if you can, many of us have to work, to help pay the expenses and for the, various and sundry things that I mentioned before. But if you can keep the number of hours you're working down a little bit that first semester, or if you're in the position of not needing to work, it is a good idea, because until you get used to sort of the new academic scene, the new social scene, being away from home sometimes can have an impact. Having a little bit more time to sort of figure out how to manage all that before you start working is not a bad thing for some students. So consider that as well. And I know that somebody was asking about international students as well. We don't add work study to international students awards, but any international student, regardless of whether they just got a merit scholarship or whether they got merit scholarship and a need-based award, they can also work on campus. And in fact, that's the only place they can work. So we do have many international students working across campus in a wide variety of jobs.
I have a couple of questions that's a little off topic, but since it is a big factor in people thinking about finances, I'm going to answer. And there's a couple of questions about our accelerated master's degree.
Okay.
So I'll take these ones, Jennifer, if you want.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
so for those of you that you are not aware, Clark offers an accelerated master's degree program. It's a colloquially on campus often referred to as the fifth year free program. And this is a way for students that do well at Clark. Programs differ a little bit, but they usually require between a 3.4 and a 3.6 GPA during their Clark years are eligible to apply for one of our master's degree programs. And there's 14 different master's degrees that are part of the accelerated degree program. Students start the application process towards the end of their junior year, and that gives them a preliminary acceptance into the program based on do they have the qualifying GPA at that point. And if they do, they're allowed to take a few graduate level courses as part of their senior year. That's part of the accelerated process, is that they can take graduate level courses at the same time as undergraduate courses, and that course can double count for the 2 degrees. And then if at the end of their senior year, they still have the qualifying GPA, they're fully admitted into the program of their choice, and they stay for 1 additional academic year and complete that master's degree. It's the same amount of work that's typically available, or not available, required in a 2-year master's degree, but because students start the degree in their senior year and many of the programs use the summer, they can get that work done in about 18 months. Qualifying students pay no tuition for the 5th year, so that's why it's the 5th year free program, and about 1/3 of our students stay and complete a master's degree through that program. So it's a very popular program, and it is something that as you think about the costs of your education, if you know that you want to get a master's of arts in teaching or an MBA or a master's in biology, if you know that that's your ultimate goal, and you think about the 4 years cost of Clark, really covering a 5th year also, and ending up with a master's degree, it really can be something that as you think about how to finance your higher ed plans, can be a factor. So did want to touch on that. Jennifer, this is a pretty quick question. Can you confirm that the monthly payment plan is over 10 months?
Yes, it's over 10 months.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. And then this family, again, thinking ahead a little bit, they've heard that the FAFSA is going to change for the 2023-2024 year and will no longer consider the number of children in college. How will that impact, and what will Clark do to help families that are impacted by that change?
Sure. That's a really good question. So just so you know, they have put that off once already, and I'm not sure. I'm hearing some buzz that they may put it off a further year. But basically, you're filling out your FAFSA each year. If they're changing the underlying equations that contribute to the bottom line family contribution, that would be cause for concern. And right now, when you have 2 in college, it doesn't. The FAFSA calculations don't double the amount a family can pay. They say a family can afford to pay this much, and they divide it by the number of children in school. So if they're eliminating that, that can cause some concern for families, and we have heard from many families who are concerned. So the way that I'm approaching this at Clark is that as long as your income and your assets and the other items that on your FAFSA remain about the same, then we're going to shoot for having your family contribution at Clark be about the same. Now, while the federal government says that, hey, if you were a Pell Grant recipient, you could get Pell Grants the year before this change takes place, we think you'll get a Pell Grant the next year after the change takes place. That may or may not be the case, but we are planning to, when we award every year, we're looking to give each student a certain total amount of gift aid, that concept we talked about earlier. And that gift aid is made up of money from Clark and money from the state and money from Pell Grant. And the way that it works now is if the Pell Grant increases, we reduce your Clark money. But if your Clark money, if your Pell Grant, if your Pell Grant decreases, we increase your money from Clark. So it's always looking to have sort of that same amount of gift aid per student for that student. So if we're changing the underlying calculation, it could be that the federal government is no longer going to kick in their Pell Grant, and for those families, we would actually be increasing our support to the family to make up for that, because we've promised to keep families who have the same income and the same assets and all that kind of thing. We're going to hold them harmless in that. We're not going to suddenly pull the rug out from under them because the FAFSA changed. We're going to try to get our families through Clark based on the overall calculation that took place at the, for them at the beginning, irrespective of what the federal government does with their calculation. Now, if you, over the period of time, your other child graduates from school, that's a different story. But, and we may end up changing your aid then because we're now only looking at one child in school instead of two. But if you're, if the only change is that the FAFSA changed the underlying calculations, then we're going to try to keep your aid steady going forward. I know it's a long answer, but I'm sure that a lot of families weren't aware that this might be coming down the pike.
Excellent. There are a couple of questions about the presidential scholarship that I will take. Okay. First question is need a consideration in the presidential scholarship? The presidential scholarship is primarily a merit-based award, but when we are getting down to the very final hard selection of who we're going to interview, and after the interview who we're going to award the scholarship, need can be a factor. If we have two equally deserving students based on their merit, and one has more significant need, we might lean in their favor. So it could be almost a tiebreaker when we get to the really hard decisions at the end of the process, but who we're going to select for interviews and the primary criteria is a merit scholarship. And the next question about merit scholarships is if a student is awarded a presidential scholarship, how it's going to impact what's already been awarded to them. So as you all know, we're still in the process of reviewing presidential scholarship candidates. We'll be doing another round of interviews in March. So if your student is selected to interview and then is awarded the presidential scholarship, we will completely redo their financial aid package. The presidential scholarship covers tuition, room, and board. So the previous merit scholarship they received would go away. And then if they've received university need-based grants and stuff like that, for most families, that presidential scholarship is going to cover their need. So the presidential scholarship would be placed on the financial aid award, but they would get a whole new package so that they would know exactly what their situation was if they are awarded that higher scholarship. Jennifer, before you talked about appealing based on changes in the financial circumstances, lost jobs, medical expenses, things like that, can a student appeal their financial aid package because they've received a better aid award from another school? They really want to come to Clark, but it's cheaper to go someplace else. Is that grounds for an appeal?
I mean, certainly people do appeal on those grounds. We don't necessarily match appeals, but you are welcome to appeal. I definitely would also let us know about anything we might not have considered, any financial thing that we may not have considered that would strengthen your appeal. Like I said, we don't match them, but sometimes, I'm always interested when another institution gives additional aid. I'm always looking at the documents that families have submitted to make sure that we interpreted everything correctly and that there wasn't something, an additional allowance or something like that that we could have given that we didn't. So it's definitely worth your while to go ahead and appeal, but we don't necessarily match another award per se.
Right. I'll take the next one. For peace of mind, is it possible that a student will lose their merit scholarship while still in high school before they even make it to Clark? I would say that is very rare. The admit letters do say that the offer is contingent upon successful completion of the high school program. So if a student does not end up graduating from high school, that would not only affect their merit scholarship, it would impact their eligibility to come to Clark. If there is a significant drop off, a straight A student now has all Ds, we would also look at that really seriously. But it would have to be a significant drop in the academic performance for us to consider rescinding a decision or removing a merit scholarship. So if a student's struggling in AP Calculus, everybody struggles in AP Calculus, we're not going to pull back a merit scholarship for that. If a student tweaks their schedule a little bit and drops one course but is maintaining most of their courses, we're not going to take a merit scholarship away for that. I've been at Clark for 20 plus years, and I can think of two circumstances in that 20 years where we in one case removed a merit scholarship, and in another case lowered a merit scholarship because of their academic performance after we sent them an admit letter. So it's a very rare thing. If you're concerned, if your student is struggling, reach out to us and we'll have a conversation with them. Jennifer, are there income levels where a student just would never be considered for a Clark University need-based grant? Where would we eliminate that?
You know, I get asked this question a lot, and it's like one of those it depends things. So it depends on how many children there are in college. It depends on how what the family has in assets, that kind of thing. But in general, if you have one child in college and you have what I would call average assets for the income bracket, if you're making more than about $200,000, you probably would not get need-based grant. And it would be a little bit doubtful below that income, mostly because we do have such a generous merit scholarship program. There would have to be room for both the merit scholarship, and then there would still have to be need after we subtract the merit-based scholarship. There would still have to be some need there for us in order for us to give some need-based grant aid. So it's around there, but then that's like a family of four with one in college with, you know, $250,000 of assets, but every family is very different, so there's like no really hard line that I can draw. Difficult question, but you know, if you're worried about it, you can it's the FAFSA form honestly is very easy, and at the very least you would be eligible for the federal loans for your student, so it's worth your time, and then it would give us a little bit more information so that we can kind of guide you about whether you want to do the profile or not. I mean, we've already had deadlines, but if you haven't done it yet and you're looking for that kind of help, you know, we're happy to help you with that. Just either email or call to make an appointment.
Excellent. I'm going to grab this next one quickly. Do students generally live off campus as juniors and seniors? And if so, how much does it cost to live off campus? So we do require students to live on campus their first 2 years. So all of the first years and sophomores live on campus. Juniors and seniors do have the option. A fair number of the juniors do live on campus, especially if they're going to study abroad. They don't want to sign a year-long lease. They know they're going to go abroad, so they'll live on campus for a semester, go abroad for a semester. By senior year, the majority of the seniors do live off campus. They can live on campus. I'm a Clark alum and I lived on campus all 4 years. I didn't want to be an adult and pay rent and electric bills, so I just stayed on campus. I would say rent is fairly affordable in our neighborhood. You can get a 4-bedroom apartment usually between $1,500 and $2,000. So you split that 4 ways, and it's a pretty reasonable cost. Rent costs have gone up during the pandemic, so I might be a little off on those numbers. Like a lot of places, housing costs have risen. But Clark tries to, when you look at our room and board charges compared to other urban campuses, they're actually on the lower end of that. And that is because we are trying to stay competitive in the neighborhood that we're in. We want some juniors and seniors to stay on campus, and because they can move off campus for about the same costs and potentially even a little lower, depending on how many people they're going to split apartment with, our on-campus expenses have not risen as much as other places. But that gives you a ballpark of that. Jennifer, if a student defers their enrollment, how does that impact their financial aid as it carries over?
So you do have to do the FAFSA again the next year. This year, if you happened to do an appeal and were granted appeal for this year, we would not carry that appeal forward to the next year. You would have to appeal again. In other words, one of the funds we generally give is called a Dean Scholarship or perhaps a Fiat Lux Award. Those would not carry forward the next year. If you felt that you still had some extenuating circumstances, you'd have to appeal again. If your family's circumstances on the FAFSA were quite a bit different from this year to next year, that's really the only reason, other than the appeal money not rolling forward. That's the only reason that your award would change. And
the merit scholarship will automatically defer with the student, and then
yes, it will,
because you apply every year, even as a Clark student for need-based financial aid, you go through that process again. You have had amazingly great questions. We are actually a little over time. If we did not answer your question, I think we got to the vast majority of them. Please reach out to our offices. The email addresses are on the website. I'm also going to type into the chat. I should have included this. The admitted student website, there's a lot of great information on there. There's information about the other webinars. Our next webinar is coming up in 2 weeks, and it's a Ask a Clarkie, so it'll be a student panel. It has information about visiting campus. We would love you to come and see campus for yourself, meet with us in person if you have questions, but definitely reach out to us if we can be any help. I know that this can still be a stressful process, and we are here to try to eliminate that stress and help you figure out if Clark is the next stop on your academic journey. So definitely reach out. Jennifer, any last words from you?
No, I just, reiterate what Terry said. We'd love to meet with you in person if you're going to be on campus, and try to help you the best that we can.
All right. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.